What about the famous song and dance men, the tap dancers, and the entertainers? You had people on this stage that did live shows, and then the show was followed by a movie. But naturally, the show needed an orchestra. And I'm just going to step over the footlights, and this is the orchestra pit that held 26 musicians and is a giant elevator that went up and down into the basement below the stage. Now, there are other famous people that appeared here, but more recently we have the chorus of pigeons. If you listen real closely, you can hear pigeons up in the rafters because the Loew's Kings is dark. The Loew's Kings is waiting to be restored, reopened, and made into the palace that it deserves to be. Sure, it needs a lot of work, but the inner city is the heart of New York. The people of this neighborhood would only be a portion of those coming to enjoy live shows, not just movies, but live shows, concerts, entertainment series, legitimate theater, right here again on the stage of the Loew's Kings. You notice we have doors that are sliding steel doors, and they seem to be on the second floor and the third floor and the fourth floor going up backstage. Well, how can anybody walk in or out of a door if there are no stairs? Well, I found out the answer recently. When the performers came through the backstage entrance, which is right to our side, and they brought in their trunks, okay? Their show business trunks with all their costumes and so on were placed right here. They were then hoisted up to the second, third, or fourth floor, where they could be grabbed by another stagehand and brought to the dressing room of the appropriate performer. So this replaced sort of an elevator. I'll tell you, I feel like a vaudeville trooper. I've just come into the backstage entrance of the Loew's Kings, and I have to stop right over here because the guard is on duty, and I'll ask him for a key to my dressing room. He's got him right in this little rack. It's like a hotel front desk. And nobody got past this guard, unless you knew somebody. But just keep walking this way, and we're going up the stairs to the dressing rooms. You got to remember, these dressing rooms have not been used for live shows for performers since 1935. The theater opened in 29, and by 1935, vaudeville was finished. It was finished because you had sound motion pictures, you had the birth of radio, and these same performers could now have the ability to reach a much larger audience without running from theater to theater all over the country. So here's the first floor of dressing rooms.
Find out who it is.
Dressing room number one.
Who? It's a Hawaiian.
You can see how this is all rotted away.
Well, he must be. He says he's brown from the morning sun.
This is dressing room
name is
5.
The Morning Sun is the newspaper he's working on. But
It's kind of interesting because most theaters in those days, back in 1929, and even in the present, they don't do very much for the performer in terms of amenities. But you're noticing a porcelain pedestal sink, and you're noticing a window. Now, for a non-star dressing room, to have a window and a sink, private sink, is just unheard of. Not only in 1929, but in most theaters today. So it gives you an idea of how classy, what an incredible place this was, how Loew's theaters were, I mean, really top rate. Now, these, they sort of remind me of, remember the old movie, The Man in the Iron Mask? Well, this is the light bulb in the iron mask to protect the bulb, and it's on either side of the mirror. And of course, here's your dressing table. They'd put their makeup out. They had a little electrical outlet here, but it certainly wasn't for a hairdryer, not in those days. And they would sit here and get ready to do their show. And as I say, this was not a star's dressing room. Every performer that worked here was treated like a king. This is dressing room 8, but it's really the wardrobe room where the fitter and the tailor were situated, and each of the costumes for example, the chorus girls were all fitted right in this room, and there it is, wardrobe room. Now, at the end of the hall, we're going to take a look at the chorus girls' room, because just like Radio City Music Hall, they didn't have the Rockettes here. They had the Chester Hale dancers, and they were famous. So let's go down the hall. Come. We're looking at the chorus room. I don't know if I should be in here, but this is the chorus room for the ladies. This is where the Loew's Kings gave lodging to the Chester Hale dancers. Now, they were very famous. They were like the Rockettes, and they toured the Loew's circuit. They went from the Loew's Capitol on Broadway to the Loew's Metropolitan, downtown Brooklyn, and then they performed here at the Loew's Kings, and then over to Pitkin Avenue, right off Eastern Parkway, to the Loew's Pitkin, because they all carried the same show, and it was the Loew's Vaudeville Circuit. Now, in here, you notice there are 3 sinks. There are a number of mirrors and lights and dressing tables, and here's an actual chair. And they would sit here and they'd put on their makeup and they'd put on those headgear, you know, with feathers and flowers and satin and glitter, and they'd dress right here, and then they were ready to go on stage, because the Loew's Kings wasn't just a movie palace. This was live shows. This was vaudeville. So first you'd have the chorus girls, then might come a singer, someone like Arthur Tracy. He was known as the street singer. You then would have a couple of animal acts or a balancing act, juggling. If all this sounds familiar and you never saw vaudeville, well, I could be describing the Ed Sullivan Show, because really the Ed Sullivan Show was television vaudeville. And if you think back, Eddie Cantor, Jimmy Durante, Bob Hope, Milton Berle, every one of the people I mentioned earlier, they played vaudeville in this theater, but they also played vaudeville on radio, in the movies, and later on the Ed Sullivan Show. So Ed Sullivan brought back vaudeville. This is another dressing room, but this was a little bit more luxurious. Maybe this was one of the stars' dressing rooms. Now, for example, you don't just have a couple of wooden chairs, you've got a beautiful original love seat sofa in the dressing room. It's right here. Hand-carved feet on. The original fabric has been covered over with a leatherette, but the point is, it's the original stuff when the theater was opened in 1929. And here's a matching comfortable easy chair. So maybe Jimmy Durante, maybe he sat here waiting to go on stage with his personal sink, with all the clothing hooks for his wardrobe.
It's time to say
Well, Durante came in, and the first thing he did, he says, "Where's the music?"
what more than a say.
He took the music. It was a whole library, maybe about 500 numbers, the piano parts. He took the whole library and he just threw it up in the air. And all of the music just scattered over the entire stage. And then they expected us to play after the show was over. There was no way that could have happened. So Durante says, "Oh," he says, "I shouldn't have done that." He says, "Wait, I'll pick them up." And he sat down on the floor and he picked up piece by piece, and there's an audience of almost 3,000 people in the audience waiting for something to happen. He's picking up music and piling it higher on the piano.
I remember Billy Gilbert coming, and he was a rather large, heavy man. He was good at accents. He often played to Germans and different roles like that. When he got there, he asked for a bottle of water, and they brought him a glass, and he insisted that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted a bottle of water. And they got a quart milk bottle and filled it with water, which he proceeded to drink, and then he refilled the bottle.
Well, where we lived in Brooklyn, right off Flatbush Avenue, there was a bakery. It was a huge building, which I realized afterward was Bond Bread. It is subsequently gone. But on top of that building was a huge outdoor sign with the 24 sheets that they used in theaters for outdoor signs, but that had a special part of the sign for the vaudeville shows that they had at the Brooklyn Paramount. And I looked up there one day, and I see to my surprise that Frank and Milt Britton and band, a very crazy act in vaudeville, was apparently staying on for another week. And then I realized in a couple of days that Frank and Milt Britton and band, in fact, the whole sign was staying there. Nothing was changing, and I knew that wasn't so. And vaudeville was gone, to all intents and purposes, from Brooklyn. When that was the end of that show, and I guess that was the last one to play at the Brooklyn Paramount.
There wasn't any vaudeville going on when I was there. They had Screeno later on. I used to go check the attendance at the other theaters in the neighborhood every day to see if they were doing better business than we were. Counting the house is what we called it. And I'd go to the Kenmore and to the Flatbush where they had vaudeville. The only time I can remember that lobby being empty on a Saturday night was when they showed a film with Clark Gable and Myrna Loy, and it was called Parnell, and it was the biggest flop that was ever made.